Good evening. Welcome to tonight's class where we talk about 50 full days for Shavuos and if you can make an early Shavuos. So that is the main topic and thrust of what we're going to discuss this evening. So let's just do a little bit of background. Okay, so we say that the mitzvah to get to Shavuos is the mitzvah of counting the Omer. And the mitzvah is Usvart Lechem Sheva Shabbatos Shanim. Sorry. Usvart Lechem Shiva Shavuos. That's what happens. You have to make Shivas in your head, and you have to count 7 full weeks. Shiva Shavuos Timos Tiena. That there should be 7 full weeks. And what that means is that the 50 days after the first day of Pesach, 50 days after the first day of Pesach is the time for Shavuos. Shavuos is the only holiday on the calendar, the only Chag, the only Moed. Its appointed time is not affixed to a specific day. It is specifically related to the position of Pesach. So the relationship between seeing the new moon for the month of Sivan is not an imperative. Neither is the new moon for the intervening month of ER. So you have Nisan, ER, Sivan, and you have those months relating to each other. It doesn't matter when the Rosh Chodesh is, because the 50th day is going to be Shavuos. So that's not how our calendars work. Our calendars work differently. They've been set, but based on what the Torah is requiring, it's requiring you to establish Shavuos on the 50th day, which would technically mean that outside of the land of Israel, if you could get the message to everybody when Pesach started, Shavuos should only be 1 day, but the minhag was still to nonetheless keep Shavuos as 2 days, and that's going to be important for the second half of our discussion. But let's first talk about the starting of Shavuos themselves, meaning the actual Yom Tov of Shavuos, and it's being affixed at the 50th day. Okay, so just a couple of things about it. So these 3 days leading up to Shavuos are the days when they used to prepare. They're actually a slight holiday. That they are meant to be a holiday called the Shlosha Shemei Hagbala, the 3 days of kneading the dough, because the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves of wheat that were brought into the temple, brought into the Beis Hamikdash, were meant to be made on these days, and that's how you would permit the new crop to be brought into the temple. Now, that is, that's not to say that they were brought on the altar. They were not, but it was part of the offering of the day, and that is what allowed everyone to go and enjoy, to go ahead and bring the regular, standard, continual meal offering from the new grain. So the rest of the land of Israel could go ahead and eat from the new crop at the beginning of this time. So if you're not familiar with exactly what I'm stating, I'm talking about that crop went from being prohibited as being chadash, as being from the new crop, and became the old crop, the yashan crop, after the first day of Pesach, and that is when you would bring the omer of barley at that time, is on that second day of Pesach, and that would permit all of the other grains to be eaten in the land of Israel. But then, in order to use things as meal offerings, you had to do the Shtei Halechem on Shavuos, and so that is the 50th day. So how does it impact us when we don't have a Beis Hamikdash? So the way that it impacts us is that a number of customs developed as a result of having it being called Sheva Shavuos Timos Tiena, that you should have 7 complete weeks, and that is why the custom is to only start the nighttime, the evening prayers of Shavuot after nightfall. So the reason for every other holiday after nightfall is as follows. Why do we wait for after nightfall for every single Yom Tov? Why do we have to wait until 3 stars come out? So the number one is because of Pesach. Pesach, the redemption started at night, and so therefore the custom is to continue to go ahead and recite the evening prayers at night and start the Pesach Seder at Tzeitzei Kochavim. Why do you have to start at the time when the stars come out? 3 little stars in this case, what we're referring to. Because that is Moed Tzeitzei Mitzrayim. That's the time when we left Egypt. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. That's when you eat. That's when you eat the matzah, you eat the maror, you eat the korban pesach. Again, all predicated on that. Then there is a comparison of the mitzvah of sukkah and the mitzvah of pesach, which becomes waiting until nightfall to eat in the sukkah, and so therefore the prayers are delayed until that time. And for Shavuos, why not wrap that one in? It's not compared to Pesach, it's not compared to Shavuos, but also the minhag came to roll it in because you needed 7 full weeks. So the minhag developed. The reason I call it the minhag is because the Torah, the Torah doesn't require us to doesn't sanction us to either start the prayers early, nor does it require us to start them late. The rabbinic enactment itself requires the prayers be daven in the evening, and so therefore there would be no intrinsic reason to delay it until, or to bring it earlier, or to delay it beyond the evening time. Now, in some places they say it after Shkia, so you get home after sunset, so you can get home and start your Seder at Tzeitzei Kochavim, or go sit in the Sukkah at Tzeitzei Kochavim, because that's the appropriate time to make the blessing on the mitzvah. But there is no such mitzvah on Shavuos, so it would just be basically to go home and to have said, I have completed 7 full weeks, and day 50 is Shavuos. We don't count day 50 because the Omer is counting up the Shavuos. So tonight would be the last night we count for the 7 full weeks. So if you've gotten through the whole weeks again, give yourself a pat on the back. Baruch Hashem. So that is counting 7 full weeks. And so therefore we wait until Tzeitzei Kochavim to recite Ma'ariv. Does that mean that one cannot daven early? Well, no, that's not true. There is a statement in the Talmud, it's Gemara in Brachos, which if you look in the packet I sent you, Rabbi Shechler brings it down about davening early on the second day of Shavuos. There's a Gemara in Brachos, it's page 26a. It says that Rav, who was the end of the Tannaitic period and the beginning of the Amoraic period, something about 3rd century, beginning of 3rd century CE. He went from living in Eretz Yisrael. He was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who compiled the Mishnah, and he got a job teaching Midrash Halacha in Pumbedisa. And that was his first job, teaching Midrash Halacha. Midrash Halacha was to go through the Psukim and explain every legal detail about it. He complained bitterly about his job. But something that he did was he used to daven the evening prayers on the previous day. He would daven the Shabbos prayers before 3 stars came out on Friday, and he would also pray the evening prayer on Shabbos itself before 3 stars came out. So his statement was implying that as soon as you've passed the time of both Plag HaMincha and Shkia, one could go ahead and recite the evening prayers. So the Talmud seems to imply that what he was doing, or they were giving license to follow his practice. So the Gemara goes back and forth to try to understand why he does that practice. So we developed a statement to basically say that Erev Shabbos one could go ahead and pray early because that was actually similar in practice to what they did in the temple. They would get the evening materials prepared for the next day's regular offering. The regular offering for Shabbos day, there was one sacrifice, Tamid Shel Shachar, the regular standard offering that was brought continuously on Shabbos morning, and so therefore the evening preparations were done before the onset of Shabbos in honor of the Sabbath. And so that's why the prayer service, which was enacted in honor of that, was done early. And also because a number of people felt that even though we have taken upon ourselves to recite the evening service, it was not the same level of obligation as Shacharis and Mincha, which were directly related to the actual sacrifices themselves. The Trumas Hadesh and the service of removing the ash from the top of the altar, which was known as a tapuach hamizbeach, the sort of the the blaze, where the ash and everything collected, remove that in order to make room for the next day's offering. And they would take that was the reason for the evening service, was to continue and to continue to memorialize and honor that practice. But it wasn't as important. I mean, it wasn't as necessary. It had to be in the evening. And so therefore, Rav felt that it was okay to go ahead and do these things early. And there's a big dispute about whether or not one could even take on Shabbos early on Friday. So the Magen Avraham in the 16th century kind of tries to settle this dispute about davening early, whether you could have early davening, because it's a dispute that rolls on for many, many centuries. You see that's debated back and forth about whether or not the evening service is said in its entirety before nightfall. Is it only partially said? There's quite a big debate about it, and so he settles it by basically saying that because we see that they used to go ahead and do the offerings early and things were done early, so therefore on Friday night specifically, one could go ahead and bring in the Sabbath early as a Tosefet Shabbos, to honor the Sabbath more. And so therefore it's permitted to go ahead and do that, to daven as early as immediately following Plag HaMincha. Plag HaMincha is 1 1/4 hour before sunset. And that's considered nighttime according to one opinion in the Talmud, and therefore that would be the earliest time one could be honestly reciting an evening service prayer. Because the evenings pretty much, according to everybody, would start either after sunset or after Tzeis Kochavim, either after Shkia or Tzeis Kochavim, which is the sunset or the emergence of 3 stars. Now, why is this important? Well, the question is, when we have 2 days of Yom Tov, could we apply this similar rule to Yom Tov as well? Can we bring in Yom Tov early? So technically, yes, you could bring in Yom Tov early, and there would be nothing wrong with adding to it. We just don't do that because many people feel that you can, number one, perform the mitzvah of Ma'ariv more properly if it's done after Shkia and even after Tzeis Kochavim, or right before Tzeis Kochavim. And that's why we, generally speaking, on the first day of every Chag, we don't bring it in early. So then the question remains, well, about those days where we know that they're only rabbinic days, is there a reason to be lenient? So we see that Rav would daven early on Shabbos as well. It wasn't even the point that he was saying that one would have to follow the instruction of or follow the pattern of the offerings, but he felt he could even be lenient because nighttime just comes a little bit on the earlier side. So a number of people limit this on Motzei Shabbos, because on Motzei Shabbos, when you're davening at the end of the Sabbath, you recite that little paragraph in there to recite Havdalah. So if you're reciting Havdalah while it's still daylight out, that would not be proper to the sanctity of Shabbos. So many people only permit this in a case of great need, where you need to daven you'll get a minyan, and then you'll walk to the end of the farthest reaches of the boundary for Shabbos, and then immediately Shabbos ends, you could pass that boundary. They extend you that leniency in that case. So therefore, that would seem to imply that one is not allowed to go ahead and recite the Havdalah prayer early in the evening prayer before Shabbos is officially over. And such is the custom as I've seen it, and that's how I teach it. Now, I've seen people who go ahead and have allowed their congregations to actually daven early and recite Havdalah even while it's still before Shabbos is properly over. And so the reason for that would be based on this other understanding of Rav, which is to basically say that since the evening prayers are simply rabbinic anyway, the fact that you recite Havdalah is simply a mention. You can't do the whole lighting the candles and sniffing the incense and sniffing the spices until after nightfall, proper nightfall, which is 3 small stars. So that would preclude going ahead and saying that the day is over, and also saying that it's even not proper to say the festival is over. So would that allow us any leniency to go ahead and on a second day of Yom Tov, which is itself a rabbinic enactment, a custom, would we be allowed to go ahead and daven early, since we don't recite a Havdalah between the first day and the second day anyway? Havdalah is not recited at the end of the second day. So would that allow us some leniency to go ahead and daven Marv early on that first day? So that's the question. All right. So the first day we understand. Okay, we want you to daven late, but the second day, why would we also want to daven late on the second for the first day going into the second day? Well, there's two big problems. One is that you're not allowed to prepare from Yom Tov to a regular day. You're not allowed to go ahead and, let's say, bake a cake on Yom Tov to then eat during Chol Moed Sukkos. You can't do that. Not allowed. Okay, you couldn't cook extra food on Yom Tov, on Pesach, Rishon, right? To go ahead and eat it during Chol Moed Pesach. It's not allowed. But you're allowed to cook for that day on that day. Now, how are you allowed to do that? There's a permission that you're allowed to go ahead and cook because of a simple rule that you could cook because you might have guests. You don't have to just cook just for what you're going to yourself going to eat. You could cook even more than what you might actually eat. Not to worry about it, because guests could come and you could feed your guests. And so if you go ahead and start cooking, you are then preparing for both yourself and for possible guests that could come. This would even allow you to cook and allow things to extend over into the next day. This is part of the permissibility of the Eruv Tav Shilin that is used when Shabbos is right after the first or second day of Yom Tov. So this allows you and extends to you a permission to cook on Yom Tov because of the same logic. Can I use this same logic to allow me to have a meal on the second day of Yom Tov? So what's really interesting is that if you look at a number of opinions in both Ashkenazi and Sephardi sources, the Ashkenazi sources frown on this because of a concern that one might prepare. So that is one big issue. And then the other concern in Ashkenazi sources is a question of whether or not you're allowed to go ahead and recite the Kiddush early or even light the candles early, because the candles themselves are not, and say the bracha early because the candles themselves are not in honor, or not honorable for the first day. However, there's one opinion who says it's not honorable to go ahead and do the davening early because it is a disgrace to the first day of Yom Tov. Most Ashkenazi posts can disagree with that. So for sure, it's not appropriate to do when it's on Sukkot, because on Sukkot you actually have a different holiday following the last day of Sukkot. So the last day of Sukkot is technically Hoshana Rabbah, and Shmini Atzeres is another holiday, right? As one could see in the Torah law, the 8th day is a separate day. There's no mitzvah of lulav, no mitzvah of sukkah. There's nothing. The rabbis came along later on and developed the custom to have one go and sit in the sukkah on the 8th day without reciting the bracha. So therefore, there were a number of people who restricted davening early on that day, because you were then basically making it difficult for you to recite the bracha for sukkah while still Hoshana Rabbah. So that is one reason why they were rejecting davening beforehand or davening early. Would that make it impossible to do that? No. It would not. However, most people avoid davening early going into Shmini Atzeres with Hoshana Rabbah because they believe they want to extend the holiness of Sukkot, to give you mitzvah of Sukkah into this following day. However, if you did daven early, many people argue you cannot recite the bracha anymore because technically the day is over. So it's an interesting dispute over there. This problem does not exist for Shavuos. So the question is, are we really creating any type of disrespect to Yom Tov Rishon by davening early? So the decision really comes down to that no, one is not doing that. So the problem is that people are going to be preparing from Yom Tov to Chol. The general consensus is that one cannot prepare for Yom Tov onto the second, for the Yom Tov Rishon to Yom Tov Sheni. One cannot prepare from day 1 to day 2. So how would you avoid that problem and try to make early Yom Tov? Well, technically speaking, the way you would avoid that is by having a plag minyan. You'd have to daven mincha before plag and daven marv after plag, and then immediately go home and start shema before shkiyas hachama. Why? Because the Rishonim all agree that the rule of ho'il il by iklai le'orcham, this permission to prepare extra food on the first day of Yom Tov and to go ahead and eat it because guests might come, is done when it's possible people can go ahead and come back. So you would have to do it well before the sun would set. And so therefore, if you daven at Plag, you would give yourself not like a nice hour. Mariv on Yom Tov is very short. You give yourself a good hour to come back, sit down, have a meal, and that's perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate time to go ahead and prepare the meal. No one has ever argued that having a meal at the time would not be permissible. So in fact, if women who weren't going to daven Mariv, they want to go ahead and heat themselves up something to eat. They want to cook up some eggs, or they wanted to do whatever else cook on that day, even though it's an hour beforehand, they have permission. The Torah has given them permission to go ahead and cook on Yom Tov. So therefore, a number of people have permitted having early davening on the second day of Yom Tov, as long as the mincha is before Plag of Mincha and the Mariv is right after Plag of Mincha. We call it making early Shabbos as well, a proper early Shabbos. So if you look at some of my other classes on making early Shabbos, I talk a lot about this. It's brought down in the Mishnah Berurah and Reish Membeis 242, where he talks about that's the appropriate way to have an early minyan on Erev Shabbos, so that way you don't run into the problem of aligning two opinions that contradict each other. And so if you do that for Shavuos as well, that would be fine. So the way that would work is you want to go ahead and could heat up all of their food for Yom Tov and have the meal, and even say Kiddush after Plag. Why? Because all of these things are all D'Rabbanan. They're all D'Rabbanan. So as long as you're not actually violating the first day and reciting the bracha for the second day is just a minhag D'Rabbanan. So if you're going to go ahead and honor the keeping of the malacha on the first day, you could go ahead and do it. The problem would be is if you were going to have a meal, if you're going to daven later, or if you daven mincha before sunset and daven Mariv after sunset. So if you're leaving it at Shia, you can't heat up food at that point, because at that point clearly guests are not going to come. It's late, and when it gets dark, people are generally going to be home. And so if you're heating up food at that time period, you can't assume that guests are going to come at that time because it's dark. And so therefore you would be violating Yom Tov. That'd be a Torah prohibition you'd be violating. And so that's why if you're going to prepare for Yom Tov Sheni, you'd have to wait until well after the time that Mariv is concluded before you can even heat up. So people have a very, very late meal. So a lot of shuls have begun to rely on this. It's actually an old suggestion that's found in a number of Sephardic poskim. It's not found in so many Ashkenazi poskim, but I did find some mentions of it back as far as the 15th century, and a work known as the Leket Yosher. The Leket Yosher is from the 15th century in Bohemia, and it's written by a student who's a student of Rav Moshe Isserlin, the author of Trumas Hadeshim, one of the main authors, one of the main codifiers of Ashkenazi custom. So it was found a little bit around. Now they didn't really believe it was appropriate to do. They didn't feel it was the best thing to do, but they felt one could do certain things, certain rabbinic things at that time period. So they talk about certain things in the Ashkenazic places, such as, didn't mention specifically about Davening Mar. They felt that one could, at that time, move the table, for example, from the sukkah into the house, would be acceptable, because at that point, one's not going to be using the sukkah anymore, and one will be only eating in the house for after Sukkot was over. So that was an example brought there. They didn't mention it specifically, but they show other things. Now, just to point out, in terms of American custom, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zichron Livracha, you won't find this in the Igros Moshe. It's written in a much later sefer by the grandson of Mordechai Tendler. Took a bunch of notes. He asked his grandfather, Rav Moshe Feinstein, if it was appropriate to do this. He felt that lighting the candles is a big problem. He felt lighting the candles is so the covered yantif, and you shouldn't light it early like that. So Rav Moshe was against it, simply because of a little bit of dignity owed to the yantif, the problem. However, so if you wanted to really be concerned about Rav Moshe's opinion, and not really relying on this, so you have like young kids, you want to be late, but I wouldn't detract from the custom of the community. The community should set this as a standard, but there's room to be lenient on Shavuos. If you wanted to be strict on this, you could light the candles from an existing flame after Tzeisei Kochavim on Yom Tov Sheni. That way you're lighting the candles, because the only reason why people light the candles is for the mitzvah, the mitzvah of second day yantif, and then you could say the bracha afterwards, and so you could be strict for that. But if you wanted to be strict, you wouldn't rely on this leniency at all. But just to give everyone an idea of how one could be lenient on the second day of Yom Tov, go ahead and do this. We have provided you with some interesting details. So the consensus of opinion, if you look at the Mishnah Berurah in 244 and in 668, in 244, it's basically it's the second Mishnah Berurah in there, and in 668 where he talks about what to do on the night of Hoshana Rabbah going into Shmini Atzeres. And that's in number 4 there, and you should also look where he disagrees about the davening early. He doesn't agree 100%. So there you could daven at least after Shkia, Mariv a little bit to be lenient. You have to wait all the way till after Seis to daven Mariv. But some people were even strict to wait even more than what the Mishnah Berurah requires, and wait. It makes you wait until after Seis Kochavim. So just to sort of recap what we've learned this evening, we learned a lot about what it means to have the appropriate time to establish the Mincha and Mariv prayer of Shavuos. And we talked about for Shabbos, we talked about for Av Yom Tov, for Pesach, for Sukkot, for Shavuos, even Shmini Atzeres. We learned that Shavuos, we like to have the first night of Shavuos, the Mincha and Mariv should be right up against Shkia and right up against Seisei Kochavim, so you should have 7 full weeks, and the minhag is that because it sounds like you should have the 49 full days. You're not going to have a full day without waiting until Seisei Kochavim, and that's also similar in pattern to what we do with Pesach and with Sukkot. The custom is to wait and not to have Mariv until after Seisei Kochavim, in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly at that time, and then all the mitzvahs are fulfilled after that time as well. Mostly because the main requirement to wait until that late comes from the mitzvah of Pesach, or the mitzvah of Matzah, Maror, and Pesach are all done after the time the stars come out. So therefore, we want to even move all the rabbinic stuff to later. But we learned that even back in the Tanaitic and Amoraic period, recorded specifically in the Talmud, there was a lot of leniency with the evening prayer to do it a little bit earlier. So much so that even then it was still daylight out before the sun even set. We find the Matzi Shel Shabbos Shel Shabbos for Erev Shabbos Shel Shabbos Shel Moshe Shabbos for Shabbos. He used to take the evening prayers and put them into the daytime. And so, therefore, a lot of people say that there is a lot of flexibility with the evening prayer if we wanted to have some flexibility. But the real issue is, how do we handle it on Yom Tov? In terms of, because you definitely can't do anything when it comes to Shabbos. There's no malacha. The question is being lenient so that you can kind of get a minyan now and not worry about doing it later. Which, by the way, you should know, when we would have power outages, we would actually daven early like this. We wouldn't have to walk home in pitch black dark for Motzei Shabbos. We daven Mariv at an earlier time. I remember debating one time with the Rav of a minyan. I said we should daven at Plag. We should daven Mincha at Plag and the Mariv after Plag, and then let everybody go home. And he said, well, I think it's enough light after Shkia if we just daven then. So we settled on after Shkia. There was no need to. I remember debating with him. I said, fine. But he agreed we could do earlier, we could do later. So this happened in the Halach L'Maisa one time. And it worked out fine because we didn't have to walk that far after sunset. So what we've learned tonight is that there is a concern about the cooking on Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheni. So therefore, as long as you are going to daven early with Mincha before Plag and Mariv right after Plag, you could go home and have your meal right then and there, say Kiddush and everything, even light the candles, say the blessings, because it's all rabbinic anyway, and you're not ruining the sanctity of the day of Yom Tov, and so therefore it would be perfectly appropriate to have it at that time. However, if you find that you're not going to be able to get a minyan at that much earlier time, the hour and a quarter beforehand, then you should just have everybody wait until davening Mincha before sunset and Mariv after sunset. Then you have to wait to prepare for the Yom Tov Sheni meal after Seisei Kochavim, because then for sure you need to wait for it to be over, because then you can't rely on the permissibility of a regular Yom Tov that somebody could come by, a guest could come by and eat the food with you, and that would allow you to go ahead, which would also, the logic of that would also allow you to go ahead and make the early meal. So therefore you have those two options, either daven Mincha before Plag, Mariv after Plag, and then with the hour that you have left, go home, say Kiddush, eat the meal, or wait until much later, daven Mincha before Shkia, daven Mariv after Shkia, and go home and say Kiddush and eat the meal after Seisei Kochavim. Thank you, everyone. Have a very good Yom Tif, and we will pick up this class next week with another exploration into the realm of Halakha. Have a wonderful evening. And this class will be posted shortly, within 24 hours. Have a good night.